Hello and welcome back to the channel. I hope that you're doing well. Did you know that ballpoint pen is waterproof? I'm going to be sketching in ballpoint pen today and then doing watercolour washes on top. It's one of my favourite sketching methods at the moment. It's something that I've been really enjoying the last few months. And I'm just using a standard Bic crystal ballpoint pen in black to do all of the sketching. And then I'm going to be using my micro portable painter 6 colour limited palette for the watercolours. So I'm only going to be using 6 colours. You'll have seen that palette in my previous video last week, and I've also done some videos going more in depth into my colour choices with that palette, and also a swatching video and colour mixing video. So if you're interested in seeing the palette in more detail after this video, you can go check those out. One thing that's really fun about sketching in ballpoint pen is that it really is like a pencil in pen form. I can start really light, as you can see here. I'm laying in a light under sketch to get the basic proportions, an idea of where everything is, and then I can go in and really darken up the lines and put in more final values and placements of things. So you might see me move some things around. I know on the second sketch I do move one of the eyes up slightly from the under sketch to the final lines, so pay attention to that if you're interested in seeing. And today I'm drawing secretary birds. Secretary birds are really pretty. They've got these gorgeous feathers that span out from their heads, and they also have really long eyelashes. And they've got beautiful coloration that varies from white feathers to these warm and cool greys, and then the feathers that span out from their heads are really deep, dark greys, brown greys, blue greys, and almost reaching sort of quite dark greys, almost towards black. And then the beak area and around the eye has beautiful colour variation from these really yellowy greens all the way through yellow, orange, red. And it's just a beautiful coloration on them, as well as the feather patterns. They're also really fluffy around their necks as well, so it was really fun trying to figure out how I wanted to portray the different textures and feather shapes and things like that. I decided in these sketches to simplify the larger feathers, the ones that are sticking out around the head and neck, and then focus more of the detail as you get further and further towards the face itself, so like the eyes and beak area. I focused on more detail as you get closer and closer to those, and allowed the watercolour to do most of the work when it came to the larger feathers. One thing that's really nice about ink and wash, and it includes when you're doing ballpoint, is that you can allow the drawing to really do the work, and then the watercolour on top can just add to that. Or you can do the opposite in different areas as well, which is really fun. It's a little experiment and game you can play with yourself to figure out how you want to portray different things. I'm working on the second sketch now, so I'm going to show you both of the ballpoint pen sketches, and then we'll get onto the watercolour after. And this one is a slightly more difficult angle. It's not quite head on, it's got a slight 3/4 to it, and the head is also tilted slightly so that our left is slightly higher than our right. And that was why I did end up having to move the eye a little bit towards the end. But as I mentioned, one of the really nice things about ballpoint is that you can make slight changes and it's not massively noticeable. You can still see where those changes might have been if you tell people and then they can have a really, really close look. Or if you've done it yourself and you can see where you've moved things around. You can get quite a lot of value variation with ballpoint as well. Like I said, it is almost like pencil in pen form. You can really build value, and you can do hatching, you can do flat lay colouring and everything. It's really fun. I have been doing a little bit of ballpoint pen sketching, just ballpoint with different colours, and experimenting a little bit with almost using them like a colour pencil, and that's been really fun. If you've been using ballpoint, or even if you like hate ballpoint pen, let me know your experiences with sketching with ballpoint pen in the comments. I'd love to know what you've been up to with it and what your opinions are on ballpoint pen. Art is very opinionated and very subjective, so it's always interesting to hear people's different opinions and what they love and what they don't like, and just embracing our differences and what makes us us with our creative voices, as long as it's done in a loving and understanding way with each of us as well. Speaking of art supplies, actually, the sketchbook that I'm using for this spread or this page is the Strathmore Mixed Media 500 series sketchbook. It's the same one as last week's video, the hardcover, roughly A5 size sketchbook that has 100% cotton paper inside. And it's my first time filling one of these sketchbooks, so I'm still experimenting and playing around with how the paper works, with different mediums, which mediums work really well, which ones don't, which ones need adjusting, and all of that lovely stuff. And you'll be able to see from last week's video and then also this video a little bit about how watercolour works on this paper. The main thing that I've mentioned before is that watercolour dries very, very quickly on this paper. And I used 2 water brushes today in order to adjust for that, because I wanted to have quite soft blends in certain areas for the feathers. And I found the best process for that, when using water brushes at least, is to have one water brush that you do the main colouring with, and then have another water brush that's just water, you're not dipping it in anything, and then you softly blend out with the second water brush. If you were using normal brushes, which I didn't for this spread or this page, you would have one brush that's just clean with clean water, and then you would have one brush that you're applying the paint with. It's a very similar process. I just decided to do water brushes today because I'm going to be traveling a little bit in a few months, and I really wanted to just see how this paper acts with water brushes and experiment with different ways of using them. I do definitely prefer using normal brushes over water brushes, but I do enjoy water brushes at the same time. I appreciate the ease of using them when you're outside and traveling, not having to have water with you, not having to worry about safely disposing the water, not worrying about it spilling and all of that lovely stuff. But at the same time, I do definitely prefer how normal brushes and a cup of water work with watercolour, especially if I'm doing a more finished piece, a more finished illustration where I'm using quote unquote proper watercolour paper rather than sketchbooking like this. I'm a little more likely to play around with different brushes and different techniques in a sketchbook like this. And again, when I'm traveling, I'm more likely to play around with water brushes as well. And it's all still stuff I'm experimenting with, playing around, seeing what I enjoy. I mean, it's a constant art is a constant journey of experimenting. and figuring out things that you enjoy and don't enjoy and improving at them and all of that lovely stuff. So I did use two different kinds of water brushes for this. I used the Pentel water brush, which is what you're seeing me use right now. That's what I did the colouring with. And I did for the clean water brush, I used the Caran D'Ache water brush, which I picked up quite recently, and I'm still getting used to how that acts in comparison to the Pentel water brushes. The Pentel water brushes almost have a constant flow of water to them. So you will notice that the more you use the brush after picking up paint, the more watered down it will get just because there's a constant flow of water, even if you're not squeezing the handle. But with the Caran D'Ache water brush, you have to press a button to let the water in and out. And I noticed that you can pretty much almost completely dry out the brush tip if you don't press that button for a long time. And it means that if you just like dump a bunch of colour on the palette and then just don't press the button for a while, you can almost make the water brush, act like a normal brush by dipping it in the puddles on your palette and not pressing the button for a while. So I have been experimenting with that a little bit and getting used to the painting workflow with them. You can see me dual wielding the brushes here a little bit more and experimenting with blending out the feathers for the large feathers around the head. And I did find that this method worked a lot better for the paper than methods I would use for normal watercolor paper, for 300 GSM 100% cotton paper, which in my experience, that paper, so when you get it in sheets or blocks or whatever, most brands stay wet for a lot longer than this paper, and I'm able to blend a lot more easily without having to almost immediately go in like I'm having to with this. So it's just something to adjust to, and I'm starting to get to grips with it a little bit more now. So you can see the finished close-ups of these pen and ink, pen and ink, pen, ink and watercolor, pen and watercolor sketches. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.